December 15, 1928. Mickey Torino had been running Chicago's North Side for 3 years. Al Capone's equal in every way that mattered. That's exactly why Capone chose the Lexington Hotel's Christmas Gala to end him. 200 of Chicago's most powerful men watched Mickey throw his wine in Capone's face, watched him whisper something that made Mickey's face go white. What happened in the next 10 minutes rewrote the rules of organized crime forever. The commission studied it for decades, and when old-timers talked about Al Capone's genius, they always came back to this night. The night Mickey Torino threw the wine. The night Al Capone proved that the deadliest weapon isn't a gun, it's patience. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the Lexington Hotel's grand ballroom as wine dripped from Al Capone's face onto his pristine white collar. The room had fallen silent except for the soft jazz quartet, whose members continued playing despite sensing the electric tension that now crackled through the air like lightning before a storm. Mickey Torino stood frozen, his empty wine glass still clutched in his trembling hand, as if only now realizing what he'd done. The red Bordeaux, a 1900 vintage that cost more than most men made in a year, continued its slow descent down Capone's cheek, pooling at the collar of his custom-tailored tuxedo. From his position near the ornate mahogany bar, 28-year-old Vincent Torino felt his stomach drop through the floor. His ledger book, filled with carefully documented numbers that kept Capone's empire running, suddenly felt like it weighed 100 pounds in his hands. He'd spent the last 2 years walking the razor's edge between loyalty to his blood and loyalty to his boss, but watching his father humiliate the most dangerous man in Chicago in front of 200 witnesses meant that tightrope had just snapped. Capone reached into his breast pocket with deliberate slowness, every eye in the room tracking his movement. Vincent held his breath, knowing that half the men in this room carried iron, knowing that one gesture from Big Al could turn this Christmas gala into a massacre. Instead, Capone withdrew a white silk handkerchief and began dabbing at the wine with almost feminine delicacy. "Mickey," Capone said, his voice carrying clearly across the hushed ballroom, "that's a hell of a way to toast the season." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the crowd, but Vincent could see the predatory stillness in Capone's eyes, the same look a shark wore in the moment before it struck. He'd seen that expression only once before, right before Johnny Torrio had disappeared forever. Mickey seemed to mistake Capone's calm for weakness, a fatal miscalculation that made Vincent want to scream. His father straightened his shoulders, playing to the crowd like the showboat he'd always been. "Your territory ends at State Street, Al," Mickey announced, his voice booming across the ballroom. "You forget that, and next time it won't be wine." The threat hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Vincent watched several of the other bosses, Jaime Weiss's boys, what was left of Dino Banion's crew, lean forward slightly, sensing opportunity in the blood in the water. They'd all been waiting for someone to stand up to Capone, but they'd been smart enough not to volunteer for the job themselves. Capone finished cleaning his face and carefully folded the stained handkerchief back into his pocket. Then he smiled, that famous boyish grin that had charmed reporters and terrified rivals in equal measure. He took 2 steps closer to Mickey, close enough that only the front rows could hear what he said next. But Vincent had been keeping Capone's books for 2 years. He'd learned to read lips by necessity, developed the skill during countless meetings where knowing unspoken words meant the difference between profit and prison. So when Capone leaned in and whispered something that made Mickey's face go ashen, Vincent caught every syllable. "Your son's been very helpful with my finances, Mickey. Real thorough with the details. Amazing what a father never knows about his boy." The blood drained from Mickey's face as the implications hit him. Vincent felt the walls of the ballroom closing in, felt the eyes of every dangerous man in Chicago suddenly calculating new angles, new possibilities. His careful position as neutral accountant had just evaporated like morning mist. Capone stepped back and raised his own wine glass. Somehow, impossibly, his hand was perfectly steady. "To the Christmas season," he announced to the room, "and to old friends who remind us what loyalty really means." The toast rippled through the crowd, 200 voices murmuring the words, while 200 pairs of eyes remained fixed on the drama unfolding before them. Mickey managed to lift his glass with shaking hands, but Vincent could see his father's mind racing, trying to calculate how badly he'd miscalculated, how thoroughly he'd been outmaneuvered. Vincent closed his ledger book with trembling fingers, already knowing he'd just witnessed the beginning of the end. Not just for his father, but for everything he'd built, everyone he'd tried to protect by playing both sides of Chicago's most dangerous game. The jazz quartet began a new song, "I'll See You in My Dreams," and couples started moving toward the dance floor as if nothing had happened. But Vincent knew better. In 10 minutes, maybe less, this room would become a battlefield, and when the smoke cleared, the rules of organized crime in Chicago would be rewritten in blood. He tucked the ledger under his arm and began moving toward the exit, hoping against hope that he could reach the door before Al Capone's patience finally ran out and his father's wine-soaked bravado got them all killed. Gilded exit before his legs betrayed him. The mahogany pillar caught his weight as he leaned against it, pressing his palm flat against the cool wood grain, while his heart hammered against his ribs. The ledger book slipped from his other hand, hitting the marble floor with a sharp crack that seemed to echo his father's death sentence. Around him, Chicago's elite continued their macabre dance. Women in beaded gowns glided past as if they hadn't just witnessed a man sign his own execution order. Their escorts, bootleggers, politicians, police captains on Capone's payroll, maintained conversations about stocks and weather while calculating which way the wind would blow when the blood started flowing. This was the world Vincent had chosen, or perhaps the world that had chosen him, where violence wore evening dress and murder spoke in whispers. He retrieved the ledger with shaking hands, his fingers tracing the worn leather cover that contained 2 years of his life's work. Every page held carefully documented transactions that kept Capone's empire profitable and, more importantly, kept Vincent alive. Numbers had always been his sanctuary, clean, logical, predictable. Unlike his father, who specialized in chaos, the irony wasn't lost on him that Mickey Torino had spent Vincent's childhood preaching the importance of respect, of never backing down from a fight. "A man's word is his bond, Vincent," he'd said countless times while counting money from his modest Southside operation, "and his reputation is everything." Now that philosophy had just painted a target on both their backs, Vincent caught sight of his reflection in the ballroom's ornate mirrors, pale, lean, with the soft hands of a man who worked with numbers instead of violence. At 28, he looked more like a university professor than the son of a street boss, which had served him well in his role as Capone's accountant. Nobody suspected the quiet bookkeeper of having divided loyalties. Until tonight. The jazz quartet's melody drifted across the room, mixing with the gentle clink of crystal and the rustle of silk gowns. Vincent closed his eyes and let himself remember the last time he'd heard that song, 3 months ago, in the small apartment above Benedetto's restaurant where Maria Castellano lived with her younger brother. She'd been humming it while cooking dinner, her dark hair pinned up with wisps escaping to frame her face, completely unaware that Vincent was memorizing every detail. Maria. The thought of her name was both comfort and agony. She knew him only as Vincent Torres, a respectable accountant who worked for legitimate businesses downtown. She had no idea about the Torino name, about his father's reputation, about the blood money that financed his careful courtship. When she laughed at his jokes or let him hold her hand during evening walks along Lake Michigan, she was falling for a ghost. He'd been planning to tell her the truth. After the holidays, when he'd figured out how to explain that everything about their relationship was built on a foundation of lies. But now, watching his father's wine-stained bravado play out across the ballroom, Vincent realized he might never get that chance. A burst of laughter from across the room drew his attention back to the present. Capone stood at the center of a circle of admirers, regaling them with some story, his earlier humiliation apparently forgotten. But Vincent knew better. He'd seen the predator's calculation behind those eyes, had watched Capone methodically destroy men who'd crossed him with far less provocation than what Mickey had delivered tonight. The smart move would be to run, cash in his savings, grab the next train to California, and pray that distance could erase the Torino name from Capone's memory. But that would mean abandoning Maria to discover his deception through whispered rumors or newspaper headlines. It would mean proving his father right about the coward's blood that supposedly ran through his veins. Worse, it would mean leaving Mickey to face Capone's retribution alone. Despite everything, the embarrassment, the impossible position, the years of being caught between two worlds, Mickey was still his father. Still the man who'd taught him to read, who'd worked extra jobs to keep Vincent in school when the neighborhood boys were already running numbers and stealing cars. Vincent straightened his bow tie and smoothed down his hair, buying time while his mind raced through possibilities. Maybe he could broker a peace. Maybe his value to Capone's organization was worth more than his father's insult. Maybe the wine incident would be forgotten by morning, chalked up to holiday excess and wounded pride. But even as these thoughts crossed his mind, Vincent knew he was fooling himself. In the Chicago underworld of 1928, respect was currency, and his father had just bankrupted them both. The only question now was whether Vincent would die as Mickey Torino's son or live as something else entirely. The jazz quartet finished their song, and in the brief silence that followed, Vincent heard the sound of his own fate being sealed. The applause that erupted from Capone's circle shattered the silence like breaking glass. Vincent jerked away from the pillar, his heart hammering as he realized the danger of standing motionless for so long. In this room, stillness drew attention, and attention meant death. He forced himself to move, weaving through the crowd with calculated casualness while his mind screamed warnings. The ledger felt like evidence against his chest. Every number inside it suddenly transformed from lifeline to liability. How long before someone wondered whose son had been keeping such meticulous records? How long before his careful neutrality became suspicious collaboration? Vincent was almost to the ballroom's entrance when he felt a hand close around his elbow. The grip was firm but gentle, not the brutal grasp of one of Capone's enforcers. He turned to find himself face to face with Tommy Benedetto, the restaurant owner whose establishment served as neutral ground for the city's various factions. "Vincent," Tommy said quietly, his weathered face creased with concern. "You need to see something." Before Vincent could protest, Tommy was steering him toward a service corridor that ran behind the hotel's main reception area. The narrow hallway smelled of industrial soap and stale cigarettes, a sharp contrast to the perfumed opulence they'd just left. Vincent's shoes clicked against bare concrete instead of polished marble. "Tommy, I can't. I need to get back to—" "Your father's already gone," Tommy interrupted, pulling a folded piece of paper from his vest pocket. "Left through the kitchen entrance 5 minutes ago, but this came for you 20 minutes before that wine went flying." The paper felt ordinary enough, cream-colored hotel stationery, the kind used for messages between guests, but Vincent's hands began trembling the moment he unfolded it. The handwriting was spidery, old-fashioned, definitely not from anyone at tonight's gathering. "Vincent Torres, or should I say Vincent Torino. Your real father sends his regards. Meet me in room 412 if you want to learn what Mickey never told you about the night your mother died." The words hit Vincent like physical blows. His vision blurred, and he had to grip the wall to keep from falling. His mother had died in 1911, when Vincent was 11 years old. Pneumonia, according to Mickey. A quick illness, a peaceful death. Buried in Graceland Cemetery under a simple headstone that read "Beloved Wife and Mother." Where did this come from? Vincent's voice sounded foreign to his own ears. Tommy's expression had grown grave. Desk clerk said a woman brought it. Old Italian lady, dressed in black. Spoke broken English but knew exactly who to ask for. He paused, studying Vincent's face. "Vincent, what's this about? Your mother's been dead for—" 17 years, Vincent finished automatically. But even as he said it, fragments of buried memories began surfacing. The hushed conversations that stopped when he entered a room. The way Mickey's face would close off whenever Vincent asked questions about his mother's family. The fact that Vincent had never seen a single photograph of her, despite Mickey's claims that she'd been the most beautiful woman in Little Italy. The service corridor suddenly felt like a tomb. Vincent could hear the distant sound of music and laughter from the ballroom, but it might as well have been coming from another world. Everything he thought he knew about his mother, about his father, about his own identity, was crumbling like ancient paper. "Room 412, he whispered, staring at the note as if it might reveal more secrets. Tommy grabbed his shoulder. "Vincent, don't be stupid. Tonight's not the night for mysterious meetings, not after what just happened in there. But Vincent was already moving. The ledger clutched against his chest like armor. His legs carried him toward the hotel's main staircase without conscious thought, each step taking him further from the safety of numbers and deeper into a truth that had been waiting 17 years to surface. The brass numbers on room 412 seemed to glow in the dim hallway light. Vincent stood before the door for a full minute, listening to the sound of his own breathing. Whatever waited on the other side would change everything. He could feel that certainty in his bones the same way sailors felt approaching storms. His knuckles had barely touched the wood when the door swung open. The woman standing in the doorway was indeed old, dressed in the severe black of perpetual mourning. But her eyes, dark, intelligent, absolutely familiar, made Vincent's breath catch in his throat. They were his own eyes, staring back at him from a face that time had carved into sharp angles. "Hello, Vincent," she said in accented English. "My name is Rosa Torino. I am your grandmother, and everything your father told you about your mother was a lie." Vincent's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish drowning in air. The ledger slipped from his numb fingers, hitting the carpeted hallway with a muffled thud. Rosa Torino, his grandmother, this stranger claiming kinship, stepped back and gestured for him to enter, though the word escaped before Vincent could stop it. "No, that's impossible. My mother's family. Mickey said they were all dead, said they died in the old country before you were born?" Rosa's weathered hand touched his arm with surprising gentleness. "Before the consumption took your mother? Before any of the pretty stories Mickey Torino fed you?" Her accent thickened with emotion. "Figlio mio, come inside before someone sees us." But Vincent couldn't move. The hallway stretched endlessly in both directions, the burgundy carpet and gold wallpaper suddenly seeming to pulse with unreality. Downstairs, a band played and criminals danced while his father's death warrant cooled like spilled wine. And here, in front of room 412, his entire life was being rewritten by a woman who shouldn't exist. "I can't," he whispered. "I have to go back. I have to warn Mickey about what Capone's planning. I have to—" "You have to listen." Rosa's voice carried the authority of age and absolute certainty. "Mickey Torino has had 17 years to tell you the truth about your mother, about why she really died, about why her family was never allowed to see you. Her dark eyes, his eyes, filled with tears, about why you look exactly like the man who killed her." The words hit Vincent like a physical blow. He stumbled backward against the opposite wall, his vision graying at the edges. Rosa caught his elbow, her grip stronger than her aged appearance suggested. "Not here," she murmured, glancing nervously down the hallway. "Too many ears in hotels, too many eyes that report back to men like Capone." At the mention of Big Al's name, Vincent felt something cold settle in his stomach. "How do you know about—" He stopped, realization dawning with horrible clarity. "You know what happened tonight, in the ballroom." Rosa's expression confirmed his suspicion before she spoke. "I know Mickey finally pushed too far. I know you've been keeping books for the enemy. And I know you have maybe 6 hours before someone decides the Torino bloodline is more trouble than it's worth." She pulled him into the hotel room, closing the door with a soft click that sounded like a coffin lid. The space was modest, a single bed, a wash basin, a window overlooking the alley behind the Lexington Hotel. But it was the photographs, spread across the small table, that made Vincent's legs give out. He sank into the room's only chair, staring at images of people who shared his features. A woman with his dark hair and serious expression, standing beside a man Vincent didn't recognize. Children playing in what looked like a garden. An older couple, the woman unmistakably a younger Rosa, posing formally in front of a shop with Italian writing on the window. "This is—" Vincent's voice broke. "This is my mother, Lucia Benedetto," Rosa said softly. "My daughter. Tommy's cousin. Yes, the same Tommy whose restaurant you know. She was 19 when she met Mickey Torino, 20 when she married him against our wishes, 21 when she died." Vincent picked up one of the photographs with trembling hands. His mother was beautiful, but there was something haunted in her expression, a sadness that seemed to look directly at him across the decades. "She died of consumption," he said automatically. "Mickey told me—" Mickey told you what served Mickey's purposes. Rosa sat heavily on the bed's edge. Lucia died because she discovered what her husband really was, what he was willing to do for money and power. She tried to leave him, tried to bring you back to us. The old woman's voice hardened. She died 3 blocks from our house, beaten to death in an alley. Your father told the police it was a robbery gone wrong. The room spun around Vincent like a carousel. He gripped the photograph so tightly the edges began to crease. That's not... Mickey wouldn't. He loved her. He told me stories about how much he loved her. Maybe he did love her in his way. Rosa's tone suggested she doubted even that much. But he loved his reputation more, loved his territories and his money and his standing with the other bosses. When Lucia threatened to expose what she'd learned, when she tried to take his son away, she shrugged with bitter acceptance. Mickey chose which love mattered most. Vincent felt something breaking apart inside his chest, some fundamental structure that had held his world together for 28 years. The ledger on the floor seemed to mock him with its neat columns and careful calculations. All those numbers hiding the truth that he'd been keeping books for his father's business while sleeping in a bed bought with his mother's blood. "Why now?" he whispered. "Why tell me this tonight?" Rosa's expression grew grim, because tonight Mickey finally picked a fight he can't win. And when Al Capone comes for the Torino family, he won't care about the difference between guilty and innocent. The photograph slipped from Vincent's fingers, floating to the floor like a dying leaf. He stared at Rosa, this woman who claimed to be his grandmother, this keeper of secrets that rewrote everything he thought he knew about himself. "You're saying my father murdered my mother?" The words tasted like ash in his mouth. "And I've been living off that blood money ever since." Rosa's silence was answer enough. Vincent pushed himself out of the chair, pacing to the small window that overlooked the alley. 3 stories below, Chicago's underworld conducted its nightly business. Figures moving in shadows, packages changing hands, the endless dance of corruption that had become as natural to him as breathing. "There's more," Rosa said quietly, "about why Mickey really took you away from us, about why he was so determined to keep you from learning the truth." Vincent's reflection stared back from the window glass, pale, haunted, looking more like a ghost than a living man. "I can't hear any more tonight. I can't—" "You think you can walk away?" Rosa's voice sharpened with desperate urgency. "You think Capone will let you disappear into the night? Figlio, you've been keeping his books for 2 years. You know where every dollar comes from, where every body is buried. The moment Mickey threw that wine, you became either an asset or a liability, nothing in between." The truth of it hit Vincent like ice water. He'd been so focused on his father's transgression that he hadn't considered his own exposure. Every transaction he'd recorded, every meeting he'd witnessed, every conversation overheard while balancing ledgers, all of it made him valuable as long as he was loyal. But the son of the man who'd humiliated Al Capone? What am I supposed to do? Vincent turned from the window, his composure finally cracking. Run to Capone and denounce my own father? Prove my loyalty by helping plan Mickey's murder? "You could," Rosa said matter-of-factly. "It's what Mickey would do if the positions were reversed. What has done when family became inconvenient." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Vincent found himself thinking of all the times Mickey had spoken about cutting loose dead weight, about the necessity of choosing business over blood when survival was at stake. How many stories had his father told about men who'd chosen family loyalty over practical considerations, and how those men always ended up dead? "But that's not who you are," Rosa continued, studying his face with those familiar dark eyes. "Lucia's son wouldn't sacrifice others to save himself. Even after everything Mickey taught you, you still have her heart." Vincent laughed bitterly. "Her heart? I don't even remember her voice. All I have are Mickey's lies and your photographs of a stranger." "You remember more than you think." Rosa stood, moving to the photographs scattered on the table. She selected one, a close-up of Lucia holding a baby Vincent recognized must be himself. "She used to sing to you. Neapolitan lullabies her own mother taught her, and when you cried she would walk you around the apartment, pointing out things through the windows. 'Look, Vincent,' she would say, 'see how the morning light makes everything new?'" The words triggered something deep in Vincent's memory. Not quite a recollection, but an echo of feeling, warmth and safety in a woman's voice speaking softly in the darkness. He'd always attributed that vague sense memory to childhood dreams or wishful thinking. "She wanted better for you," Rosa said. "Not just the money Mickey promised, but something clean. Something that wouldn't require washing blood from your hands every night." She gestured toward Vincent's expensive suit, his manicured fingernails, his soft accountant's hands. "Look what you became instead, a well-dressed accomplice to the men who profit from misery." Vincent felt something hot and sharp rise in his throat. "I keep books. I don't hurt anyone. Don't you?" Rosa's voice was gentle but relentless. "Every dollar you help Capone hide is a dollar that came from someone's suffering. Every transaction you balance makes the machine run smoother. You think your clean hands make you innocent?" The accusation landed like a physical blow, because Vincent had asked himself the same question countless times over the past 2 years. Late at night, when the ledgers were closed and the numbers all balanced neatly in their columns, he would lie awake calculating the true cost of his survival. How many speakeasies paid protection money that funded his salary? How many families went hungry because their fathers owed debts to men Vincent helped keep profitable? "I was trying to build something," he said weakly. "Save money, maybe start my own business, get out clean." "With Maria Castellano?" Rosa's knowing look made Vincent's blood run cold. "Yes, I know about her. Sweet girl, works at her brother's bakery, dreams of opening her own restaurant someday. Believes you're just another honest businessman trying to make his way in the world." Vincent's chest tightened. "How do you—" "The same way I knew you'd be at the Lexington tonight. The same way I knew Mickey would finally push Capone too far." Rosa moved closer, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "I've been watching you, Vincent. Watching and waiting for the moment when the truth would matter more than the comfortable lies." Vincent's world tilted on its axis. "Watching me? For how long?" 2 years, Rosa said simply. "Since the day you walked into Capone's organization with your ledger books and your innocent face." She reached into her black handbag and withdrew a manila envelope, thick with contents. "Since the day I realized Mickey's son had become exactly what Lucia died trying to prevent." The envelope hit the table with a soft thud that seemed to echo in Vincent's chest. Rosa opened it methodically, spreading its contents beside the family photographs. But these weren't memories. They were surveillance reports, written in careful handwriting he didn't recognize. Subject met with Capone Lieutenant at Hawthorne Inn. Duration, 2 hours. Observed reviewing financial documents. Subject visited Maria Castellano at family bakery. Appeared distressed. Left without purchasing anything. Subject spent evening at Palmer House, room 237, with unidentified woman. Payment observed changing hands. Vincent's hands shook as he read his own life reduced to clinical observations. The last report was dated 3 days ago, the night he'd met with Capone himself to review the quarterly books. "You've been having me followed." His voice was barely audible. "By who? For who?" Rosa's expression hardened. "For Lucia. For the daughter who never got to see her son grow up. And for you, whether you're smart enough to understand it or not." "That's not an answer." Vincent swept the surveillance reports off the table, scattering them across the threadbare carpet. "Who's been watching me? Who's paying for—" He stopped mid-sentence as a terrible possibility occurred to him. "Oh, God. You work for them, don't you? This is all some elaborate setup. Capone sent you to—" "Capone?" Rosa's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "You think Al Capone knows about family loyalty, about protecting blood?" She moved to the window, peering down at the alley with practiced caution. "Capone knows about power and money and eliminating threats. If he wanted you dead, Vincent, we wouldn't be having this conversation." Vincent felt the walls of the small room closing in. "Then who? Who's been tracking my movements for 2 years? Who knows about Maria, about every meeting I've had with—" "The Benedetto family," Rosa said quietly. "Tommy and his brothers. Your mother's cousins who've spent 17 years waiting for the chance to bring Lucia's killer to justice." The revelation hit Vincent like a physical blow. Tommy Benedetto, The neutral restaurant owner, the man who'd handed him the mysterious note, the keeper of peace between Chicago's warring factions, the same Tommy who'd been feeding him Sunday dinners for months, who'd listened sympathetically when Vincent complained about the moral weight of his work. "Tommy's been reporting on me," Vincent whispered. "All those conversations, all those times he asked about my plans, my relationship with Maria." The betrayal felt worse than anything Mickey had done. At least his father's lies had been motivated by self-preservation. Tommy's deception was calculated, patient, predatory. "Not reporting," Rosa corrected. "Protecting." "Do you think it's coincidence that every time Capone's men got too suspicious of the Torino family, some other crisis would arise to distract them? Every time Mickey overplayed his hand, some information would find its way to the right ears to defuse the situation?" Vincent sank back into the chair, his mind reeling. The warehouse raid last month, when Capone's shipment got intercepted by federal agents. Tommy's information, Rosa confirmed, designed to make Capone focus on government threats instead of internal ones. The fight between the Giannina brothers that kept everyone busy for 3 weeks, orchestrated. A few carefully placed rumors, some misdelivered messages. Vincent felt sick. "You've been manipulating everything, moving pieces around like we're all chess figures in some game I didn't even know I was playing." "We've been keeping you alive," Rosa said flatly. "And Mickey, too, though he doesn't deserve it. Buying time until tonight, until he finally gave us the opening we needed." What opening? But even as Vincent asked the question, he knew. The wine incident hadn't just been Mickey's drunken loss of control, it had been the inevitable result of months of careful pressure, pushing his father toward exactly this moment of public humiliation. Rosa's smile was cold as winter. Mickey Torino has always been predictable. Push his pride, threaten his territory, question his authority, and he'll always lash out without thinking. We just had to wait for him to do it in front of enough witnesses to make his elimination seem justified. Vincent stared at this woman, who claimed to be his grandmother, this stranger who'd orchestrated his father's downfall with the patience of a spider. "You set him up. You maneuvered him into attacking Capone. I gave him the rope," Rosa said simply. "Mickey chose to hang himself with it." The cold calculation in her voice chilled Vincent more than any of Capone's threats ever had. "What does that make me? Another piece in your game?" Rosa's expression softened slightly. "You're Lucia's son. You're the only reason any of this matters." Vincent felt the weight of those words settle into his bones like lead. "The only reason any of this matters," he repeated slowly. "Not justice for my mother, not stopping Mickey from hurting anyone else. Just me." "You think those things are separate?" Rosa moved closer, her voice taking on an urgency that made the small room feel even more claustrophobic. "You think we could get justice for Lucia without her son? You think we could stop Mickey without someone who knows his business, his connections, his weaknesses?" The surveillance reports scattered on the floor seemed to mock him with their meticulous detail. Vincent realized that every relationship in his life, Mickey, Tommy, even Maria, was built on lies and manipulation. "What exactly do you want from me?" Rosa reached into her handbag again, this time withdrawing a small wrapped bundle. She unwrapped it carefully, revealing a leather-bound journal worn smooth by handling. "Your mother kept a diary," she said quietly. "Right up until the day she died, she documented everything she learned about Mickey's business. Names, dates, amounts, evidence of murders, extortion, bribes to police and judges." Vincent stared at the journal as if it were a snake. She was building a case against him. She was building a way out. For both of you. Rosa opened the journal to a page near the end, her weathered finger tracing lines of careful handwriting. "Listen to this. Vincent asks why Papa works such long hours. Someday I'll have to tell him that Papa's work requires darkness, but not yet. Not while there's still hope for something clean." The words hit Vincent like physical blows. His mother's voice, speaking to him across 17 years of lies and carefully constructed mythology. He reached for the journal with trembling hands, but Rosa pulled it back. "She knew Mickey would kill her before he'd let her leave with you," Rosa continued. "So she made copies, hid evidence in places Mickey would never think to look, left instructions for what should happen if... She gestured helplessly. If what did happen, happened. Vincent felt something breaking inside his chest. You've had proof of Mickey's crimes for 17 years. You could have gone to the police, to the federal agents, to who? Rosa's laugh was bitter. Half the police force is in Mickey's pocket. The other half is in Capone's. You think justice works the same way for families like ours as it does for the wealthy people in their clean neighborhoods? She was right, and Vincent knew it. He'd seen enough of Capone's organization to understand how deeply the corruption ran. Police sergeants who lived in houses their salaries couldn't afford. Judges who always found reasons to dismiss charges against certain defendants. Federal agents who somehow never managed to find evidence that everyone knew existed. So what's the plan? Vincent asked. Use my mother's evidence to destroy Mickey? Watch Capone eliminate him and claim it as justice? The plan, Rosa said slowly, is to give you a choice your mother never had. Walk away clean or stay and become exactly what killed her. Vincent felt the walls closing in again. That's not a choice. If I walk away, Capone will hunt me down. If you stay and do nothing, you'll spend the rest of your life washing blood off money. Rosa's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. Your children will grow up the way you did, on proceeds from other people's misery. Maria will learn what kind of man she really loves when it's too late to leave safely. The mention of Maria sent ice through Vincent's veins. She's not part of this. Whatever happens between Mickey and Capone, whatever justice you think you're serving, Maria stays out of it. Rosa studied his face with those familiar dark eyes. You really love her. Yes. The word came out more forcefully than Vincent intended, which is why I need to keep her as far from this mess as possible. Then you understand what your mother felt. Rosa reopened the journal to a different page. Here, watched Vincent sleep tonight. He looked so peaceful, so innocent. How do I tell him his father's hands are stained with blood? How do I explain that the money paying for his clothes, his food, his future, all of it comes from other mothers' tears? Vincent closed his eyes, trying to shut out the words, but they seemed to echo in his skull. When he opened them again, Rosa was holding out a small brass key. This opens a safety deposit box at First National Bank, she said. Everything is there. Your mother's evidence, witness statements from people Mickey thought were too afraid to talk, financial records that trace every dirty dollar. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Enough to destroy him completely. Enough to free you from his world forever. Vincent stared at the key, understanding that taking it would mean crossing a line he could never step back over. And if I don't? Rosa's expression hardened. Then tomorrow morning, Mickey Torino will be dead, and you'll spend the rest of your life wondering if you could have saved him, if you could have saved yourself, if you could have been the man your mother died believing you could become. The key seemed to burn in her outstretched palm like a small piece of the sun. Vincent's hand hovered over the brass key, his fingers trembling with the weight of 17 years. The small piece of metal caught the dim lamplight, throwing shadows across his mother's journal like bars across a prison cell. You're asking me to destroy my own father, he said quietly. I'm asking you to save yourself. Rosa's voice carried no judgment, only the patient certainty of someone who had waited decades for this moment. Mickey made his choices long before you were born. Every death he ordered, every family he destroyed, every dollar he stole, those were his decisions. You don't owe him your soul as payment for his sins. Vincent thought of Mickey's face tonight, flushed with wine and rage as he hurled the glass at Capone. The shocked silence of 200 witnesses. The cold calculation in Capone's eyes as he dabbed burgundy from his collar. His father had always been a man of violent impulses poorly controlled, but tonight had been different. Tonight had been suicide disguised as pride. He raised me, Vincent whispered. He used you. Rosa's fingers tightened around the key. Just like he used your mother. Just like he'll use Maria if you give him the chance. She opened the journal again, finding another page marked with a pressed flower. Listen, Mickey brought Vincent to the warehouse today, said the boy needs to understand the family business. Vincent is only 8 years old, and already Mickey is teaching him to calculate percentages of other people's suffering. I have to get us away from here. I have to save him before Mickey's world becomes the only world he knows." The words cut deeper than any physical wound. Vincent remembered that day at the warehouse, the first time he'd seen the neat columns of numbers that represented protection money, gambling debts, loan shark payments. Mickey had been so proud, explaining how the ledgers kept everything organized, how mathematics made chaos into profit. Vincent had felt important, included, special. Now he understood he'd been watching his own corruption begin. "She tried to leave," Rosa continued, turning more pages, 3 different times. But Mickey always found out, always brought her back, always promised things would be different. Her voice cracked slightly. "The last entry is dated 2 days before she died. Vincent asked me today why I cry at night. I told him it was because I loved him so much it hurt. Tomorrow I'm taking him to my cousin Anna in Milwaukee. If Mickey follows us this time, at least Vincent will know his mother tried to choose love over fear." Vincent felt his chest constricting, as if the small room was running out of air. His mother's words painted a picture he'd never been allowed to see, a woman fighting desperately to save her child from the very life Vincent had spent years learning to navigate. "She never made it to Milwaukee," he said. "The police called it a robbery gone wrong. Said the witnesses were too frightened to give clear descriptions of the attackers." Rosa closed the journal with careful reverence. "But your mother had hidden copies of everything, bank deposit slips showing where Mickey moved money the day before she died, receipts proving he knew exactly when and where she would be that evening. Even a letter she'd written to Anna, explaining everything she planned to tell the police about Mickey's business." Vincent felt something fundamental shifting inside him. Like the moment when a building's foundation finally gives way after years of slow erosion. The man he'd believed himself to be, Mickey Torino's grateful son, the bookkeeper trying to build an honest life from dishonest beginnings, that man was built on lies as carefully constructed as any ledger he'd ever balanced. "The federal agents," he said slowly, "if they see this evidence, they'll have everything they need to dismantle Mickey's entire operation. His associates, his corrupt contacts in the police department, his business relationships with families like Capone's." Rosa extended the key again. "They'll also have enough to guarantee immunity for anyone who cooperates fully with their investigation." The offer hung in the air between them like a bridge across an impossible chasm. On one side lay everything Vincent had ever known, the familiar weight of complicity, the comfortable lies that let him sleep at night, the gradual transformation into exactly what his mother had died trying to prevent. On the other side lay the unknown territory of truth, with all its devastating consequences and uncertain redemptions. Vincent thought of Maria's face that morning, bright with plans for their future together. The restaurant she wanted to open, the children they'd talked about having, the clean life they could build if he could somehow extract himself from Mickey's world before it consumed him completely. Then he thought of his mother, 8 years older than Maria was now, making the same desperate calculations about love and survival and the price of staying silent. "If I take this key," Vincent said quietly, "Mickey dies anyway. Capone won't let tonight's humiliation stand, and federal prosecution will just be slower than a bullet." Rosa nodded. "But if you take it, his death will mean something. Justice instead of just vengeance. Your mother's evidence will save other families from what yours became." Vincent reached out and closed his fingers around the brass key. It was warm from Rosa's palm and surprisingly heavy for something so small. "Then I choose her," he whispered. "I choose the mother I never got to know over the father who never let me choose at all." The brass key felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in Vincent's pocket as he walked through the pre-dawn streets of Chicago. The city looked different now, cleaner somehow, as if his decision had washed away years of accumulated grime from his vision. Street lamps cast sharp shadows that no longer seemed to hide threats in every doorway. He'd left Rosa's apartment 3 hours ago, but her final words still echoed in his mind. Your mother would be proud. 4 simple words that carried the weight of redemption he'd never dared hope for. The safety deposit box had contained everything Rosa promised, and more. 17 years of meticulous documentation, witness statements, financial records that traced Mickey's crimes back to before Vincent was born. His mother had been building more than just a case. She'd been constructing a complete roadmap out of the darkness that had consumed their family. But it was the letter addressed to him, written in his mother's careful script that had finally broken something loose in Vincent's chest. My dearest Vincent, if you're reading this, it means I failed to save us both while I was alive. Please don't blame yourself for anything that comes after. The choices that led us here were made long before you were old enough to understand what choice meant. You are not your father's sins, my love. You are my hope made flesh. Vincent paused outside the federal building, watching early morning workers stream through the massive doors. In a few hours, he would walk through those same doors carrying evidence that would destroy everything Mickey Torino had built. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, he felt something he hadn't experienced since childhood: the absence of guilt. A newspaper vendor on the corner was already hawking the morning edition. Capone's rival found dead. The headline screamed in bold type. Vincent bought a paper with steady hands, unsurprised to read that Mickey Torino had been discovered in an alley behind the Lexington Hotel, 3 bullets in his chest. The article quoted unnamed police sources suggesting it was retaliation for an incident at a private gathering. Vincent folded the paper and continued walking. Mickey's death changed nothing about what he planned to do. If anything, it made the decision easier. Justice for the dead required truth from the living. The morning sun was painting the sky pale gold when Vincent finally arrived at Maria's apartment building. She answered the door in her robe, hair tousled from sleep, eyes widening when she saw his face. "Vincent? What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Something like that." He stepped inside, taking her hands in his. They felt warm and solid and real, anchors in a world that had spent the night reshaping itself around him. "I need to tell you some things, about my family, about who I really am." Maria searched his face with the careful attention of someone who loved him enough to be afraid. "Whatever it is, we can handle it together." Vincent had spent years learning to lie, to deflect, to present carefully edited versions of truth. But looking into Maria's eyes, he found himself capable of something he'd never tried before: complete honesty. He told her everything: his mother's murder, Mickey's crimes, his own complicity in laundering blood money, Rose's revelation, and the evidence that would soon bring down an entire criminal empire. He spoke for an hour, watching Maria's face cycle through shock, horror, and something that might have been relief. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time, still holding his hands. "My father will want to kill you," she said finally, "when he finds out his daughter is in love with Mickey Torino's son." "I know." Vincent squeezed her fingers. "That's why I'm giving you a choice my mother never had. You can walk away from this, from me. Start fresh somewhere else, with someone whose history won't follow you around like a shadow." Maria's laugh was soft and surprising. "Vincent Torino. Are you trying to get rid of me? I'm trying to save you." "From what?" "From loving a man brave enough to choose truth over comfort. From building a life with someone who'd rather face federal prosecutors than become his father." She reached up to touch his face, fingers tracing the exhaustion around his eyes. "You think I can't see who you really are underneath all that guilt you carry around?" Vincent felt tears he'd been holding back for 17 years finally break free. "I don't know who I really am. Without Mickey's world, without the lies I've been telling myself, I don't know what's left. Then we'll figure it out together." Maria's voice carried the same patient certainty Rose's had, but warmer, full of love instead of justice. Starting clean, starting honest. Vincent pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling something like peace settle into his bones. Outside, Chicago was waking up to a world where Mickey Torino was dead, and his empire's secrets would soon spill into federal courtrooms. But in this small apartment, holding the woman who'd chosen to love him despite everything he'd revealed, Vincent finally understood what his mother had died trying to give him: the choice to be better than the blood that made him.